The morning sun peeked through the hotel curtains as Maya rushed to finish her makeup. She was running late as usual. The alarm had gone off at 7, but after a 12-hour shift at the hospital yesterday and a late-night flight, she'd hit snooze 3 times. Now she had exactly 23 minutes to get to the wedding venue. Maya checked her appearance one last time in the mirror. Her dark blue dress looked nice enough, though a bit wrinkled from being stuffed in her suitcase. She smoothed it down with her hands and sighed. It had been almost 3 years since she'd seen her old college roommate, Natalie. 3 years of missed coffee dates, canceled video calls, and quick text messages that couldn't possibly make up for real face-to-face time. That's what happens when you choose to become a doctor, Maya thought to herself. Your friends get married, have kids, and live their lives while you're stuck in the hospital saving strangers. She grabbed her small purse, room key, and the wedding card with its delicate gold trim. The invitation had arrived 6 months ago, and Maya had immediately requested time off. Being a trauma surgeon meant unpredictable hours, but she'd made it clear to her boss that this weekend was non-negotiable. Natalie had been there for her through the worst of med school, through the all-nighters, the failed exams, and that horrible breakup with Tom. Maya wouldn't miss her wedding for anything. The taxi ride to the garden venue took only 15 minutes. Maya tipped the driver generously and hurried toward the entrance where a young man in a suit was directing guests. "Friend of the bride or groom?" he asked with a practiced smile. "Bride," Maya answered, slightly out of breath. "Is the ceremony about to start?" "You're just in time," he assured her, pointing toward a path lined with white rose petals. "Follow the path to the garden. They're seating the last guests now." Maya followed his directions, the scent of roses and fresh-cut grass filling the air. The garden opened up before her, rows of white chairs decorated with flowing ribbons, an arch of flowers at the front, and about 60 well-dressed people mingling and finding their seats. Classical music played softly in the background. She scanned the crowd for familiar faces, suddenly feeling like an outsider. Most of these people probably saw each other regularly, while she had been absent from Natalie's life except for the occasional text message. Maya? Oh my God, Maya. She turned to see a woman with curly brown hair waving enthusiastically from near the front. It took Maya a second to recognize her. Lisa, another friend from college. Maya waved back, relieved to see a familiar face, and made her way over. "I can't believe you made it," Lisa said, pulling her into a tight hug. "Natalie will be so happy. She wasn't sure if you could get away from the hospital." "I wouldn't miss it," Maya replied, returning the hug. "How is she doing?" "Nervous." "Surprisingly calm," Lisa said. "I was with her earlier. She's so ready for this. She and Daniel are perfect together." Maya nodded, though she couldn't really judge. She'd never even met Daniel. When Natalie had started dating him 2 years ago, Maya had been in the middle of her residency, working 100-hour weeks. Their relationship had developed entirely during the period when Maya's life had been consumed by her medical career. "Tell me about him," Maya said as they found seats together in the 3rd row. "All I know is what Natalie's told me over text." Lisa's eyes lit up. "He's wonderful. Kind, funny, smart. He's an engineer, works on renewable energy projects. They met through a hiking group. He proposed during a camping trip last year, right at sunrise on top of Eagle Peak. And he treats her like gold." Maya felt a twinge of guilt. She should know these things already. She should have been there to hear about the proposal firsthand, to meet Daniel before the wedding day. "The best part," Lisa continued, lowering her voice, "is how well he and Sophie get along. You know how weird it can be when your best friend doesn't like your partner." Maya frowned slightly. "Sophie?" "The maid of honor. Daniel's sister. They've become super close. Actually, that's her right there." Lisa pointed toward the front where a tall woman with honey blonde hair was adjusting flowers on the arch. Even from the back, Maya could tell she was stunning, with perfect posture and a graceful way of moving. She wore a pale green dress that complemented her slim figure. Just then, the music changed, signaling the start of the ceremony. Guests hurried to their seats as the officiant took his place under the arch. Daniel appeared from a side path, looking handsome in a gray suit, his face a mixture of nervousness and excitement. 2 groomsmen followed him, taking their positions to his left. The bridesmaids came next, walking slowly down the aisle in matching green dresses. Sophie came last, carrying a small bouquet. As she passed, Maya got her first good look at her face. High cheekbones, bright blue eyes, and a warm smile. There was something striking about her, beyond just conventional beauty. She moved with confidence, but Maya noticed a slight hesitation in her step, almost imperceptible. The music swelled, and everyone stood as Natalie appeared at the end of the aisle on her father's arm. Maya felt tears spring to her eyes. Her friend looked radiant in a simple white dress, her dark hair swept up with tiny flowers woven through it. Their eyes met briefly as Natalie passed, and they exchanged quick, emotional smiles. As the ceremony began, Maya tried to focus on the words being spoken, on the obvious love between Natalie and Daniel. But her attention kept drifting to Sophie, who stood beside Natalie at the front. There was something about the maid of honor that triggered Maya's professional instincts, something not quite right. At first, Maya couldn't pinpoint what was bothering her. Sophie looked perfectly put together, her makeup flawless, her posture elegant. But as the ceremony continued, Maya noticed subtle signs that others might miss. The slight sheen of sweat on Sophie's forehead despite the mild temperature. The way she shifted her weight frequently as if standing was uncomfortable. The barely noticeable tremor in her hands as she held the bouquet. Years of emergency room training had taught Maya to spot when something was wrong, even when people tried to hide it. And Sophie was definitely hiding something. Halfway through the vows, Sophie swayed slightly. No one else seemed to notice, but Maya's body tensed, ready to move if needed. Sophie quickly steadied herself, taking a deep breath. She pressed her palm briefly against her lower abdomen, a gesture that sent warning bells ringing in Maya's head. The ceremony continued without incident, with Daniel and Natalie exchanging rings and promising to love each other forever. When they kissed, everyone applauded, and Maya joined in, momentarily distracted from her concerns about Sophie. As guests began to move toward the reception area, Maya found herself watching Sophie again. The maid of honor was smiling and congratulating the couple, but Maya could see the strain behind her smile. When Sophie excused herself and walked quickly toward the venue building, Maya made a split-second decision and followed her. She found Sophie in the empty bathroom, leaning heavily against the sink, eyes closed and breathing deeply. "Are you all right?" Maya asked gently, not wanting to startle her. Sophie's eyes flew open. "I'm fine," she said quickly, straightening up. "Just needed a moment away from the crowd. I'm Maya, Natalie's friend from college. I'm also a doctor," Maya added, watching Sophie's reaction carefully. "A trauma surgeon, actually." Something flickered across Sophie's face, where relief, fear. It was gone too quickly to interpret. "Nice to meet you," Sophie said, reaching for a paper towel and dabbing at her forehead. "Natalie's mentioned you. The brilliant doctor who never has time to visit." The comment stung, but Maya didn't take the bait. Her focus remained on the medical assessment she was instinctively performing. Up close, Sophie's pallor was more obvious beneath her makeup. Her pupils were slightly dilated, and the hand that held the paper towel trembled visibly. "How far along are you?" Maya asked quietly. Sophie froze, her eyes widening. "What?" "The pregnancy," Maya clarified, keeping her voice calm and professional. "I'm guessing first trimester based on your symptoms." For a moment, Sophie looked like she might deny it. Then her shoulders slumped slightly. 12 weeks, she admitted. "How did you know?" "The way you were holding your abdomen, the pallor, the dizziness," Maya explained. "But mainly the way you kept pressing your hand just below your belly button. Most people don't realize they're doing it." Sophie sighed, checking her reflection in the mirror and touching up her lipstick. "Well, your secret's safe with me. Nobody knows yet, not even Daniel. We wanted to wait until after the honeymoon to tell everyone." Maya frowned, her concern growing. "The symptoms you're showing seem more severe than typical morning sickness. Have you seen a doctor recently?" "I had some spotting last week, but the doctor said it was normal," Sophie replied, waving a dismissive hand. "I'm just tired from all the wedding planning, and maybe a little dehydrated." Maya wasn't convinced, but she knew better than to push too hard. "Make sure you drink plenty of water today. And if the pain gets worse or if you feel faint again, find me immediately. Okay?" Sophie nodded, already moving toward the door. "I should get back. They'll be taking photos soon." As she watched Sophie walk away, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. Her instincts were rarely mistaken when it came to medical emergencies, and right now, those instincts were screaming at her. With a deep breath, Maya decided to keep a close eye on Sophie throughout the reception. She just hoped she was overreacting, that it really was just normal pregnancy symptoms combined with wedding stress. But as she rejoined the celebration, and watched Sophie posing for photos, smiling through obvious discomfort. Maya knew this wedding day might end very differently than anyone expected. The reception was in full swing by the time Maya found her assigned table. The garden had been transformed with twinkling lights hanging from trees and centerpieces of wildflowers on each table. A small band played gentle music as guests mingled, drinks in hand. Maya's table was near the back, filled with people she didn't know, friends of Daniel's, she guessed. She introduced herself politely before her attention drifted back to the head table where Sophie sat beside Natalie. Even from across the room, Maya could see the strain in Sophie's smile, the way she barely touched her food, and how she kept discreetly pressing her hand against her abdomen when she thought no one was looking. "First time at a wedding alone?" asked the woman next to Maya, misinterpreting her distracted gaze. "Oh, yes," Maya replied, turning her attention back to the table. "I'm Maya, a friend of Natalie's from college." "I'm Judy, Daniel's aunt," the woman said with a warm smile. "What do you do, Maya?" "I'm a doctor. A trauma surgeon, actually." "A surgeon? How fascinating. You must have some interesting stories." Maya nodded and smiled, but her mind was elsewhere. Normally, she enjoyed talking about her work, the challenging cases, the lives saved, the lessons learned. But tonight, she couldn't shake the feeling that her skills might be needed before the evening was over. As dinner wound down, the best man stood to give his toast. Maya used this opportunity to move closer to the head table, leaning against a nearby pillar while keeping her eyes on Sophie. The maid of honor's complexion had grown paler, and she was now drinking water almost frantically, a possible sign she was feeling faint or nauseated. The speeches continued, with laughter and a few tears from the audience. When it was Sophie's turn to speak, she rose slowly, steadying herself against the table for just a moment before straightening her shoulders and putting on a brave smile. "When Daniel first told me about Natalie," Sophie began. Her voice cleared despite her obvious discomfort. "I knew she was special. My brother isn't easily impressed, but the way his face lit up when he talked about her, that told me everything I needed to know." Maya watched as Sophie paused, taking a careful breath before continuing. The tremor in her hands was more pronounced now as she held her note cards. "What I didn't expect was to gain not just a sister-in-law, but a true friend. Natalie, you've brought so much joy into our family, and I couldn't be happier to officially welcome you today," Sophie continued her speech, sharing funny stories about Daniel as a kid and sweet moments from the couple's relationship. To most guests, she probably appeared perfectly normal, perhaps a bit emotional. But Maya's trained eye caught every wince, every subtle shift of weight, every moment when Sophie's free hand drifted toward her abdomen before she caught herself and moved it away. By the time Sophie finished her toast, raising her glass of water instead of champagne, another clue Maya filed away, tiny beads of sweat had formed along her hairline despite the cool evening air. As everyone applauded, Maya slipped away to the bar and requested a ginger ale. She then made her way to Sophie, who had just sat down, looking exhausted from the effort of remaining upright. "Hey," Maya said casually, offering the ginger ale. "Thought you might need this." Sophie looked up, surprise flickering across her face as she recognized Maya from their bathroom encounter earlier. "Thanks," she said, accepting the drink. "But I'm fine, really." "It might help with the nausea," Maya said quietly, ensuring no one else could hear. "And it has sugar, which might help if you're feeling lightheaded." Sophie's shoulders slumped slightly, the perfect posture giving way to fatigue. "Is it that obvious?" "Not to most people," Maya assured her. "But I spend my days looking for signs that something's wrong. It's hard to turn off." Sophie took a small sip of the ginger ale. "I just need to make it through the first dance, then I can probably slip away for a bit. No one will notice once the dancing starts." Maya nodded, though she wasn't convinced Sophie should wait that long. "The pain, is it constant or does it come and go?" "It comes in waves," Sophie admitted. "But it's getting more frequent." That was concerning. Pain that increased in frequency and intensity could indicate several serious conditions in early pregnancy. Maya's mind ran through the possibilities. Ectopic pregnancy, threatened miscarriage, appendicitis. "Any bleeding?" Maya asked, keeping her voice professional. Sophie hesitated, then nodded slightly. "A little. More than last week." Maya felt her concern deepen. "Sophie, I think you should consider going to the hospital. These symptoms, I can't." Sophie interrupted, her voice firm despite her pallor. "This is my brother's wedding day. I'm not going to ruin it by making a scene. It's probably nothing serious." Before Maya could argue further, the DJ announced it was time for the first dance. Daniel and Natalie moved to the center of the dance floor, looking at each other as if they were the only people in the world. Sophie stood to watch, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the table. Maya stayed close, ignoring the curious glances from other guests. She knew she was being obvious in her concern, but something in her gut told her this situation was escalating quickly. The couple swayed to the music, lost in their own happiness. Under different circumstances, Maya would have been entirely focused on her friend's joyful moment. Instead, she found herself mentally calculating how far they were from the nearest hospital and whether her emergency medical training would be enough if things went south before an ambulance could arrive. As the song ended, Daniel extended his hand toward Sophie, inviting his sister to join him for the next dance. Sophie smiled bravely and stepped forward, but Maya saw her sway dangerously as she moved away from the table's support. Without drawing attention, Maya positioned herself closer, ready to intervene if necessary. The music started again, a slightly more upbeat song. Daniel twirled his sister gently, oblivious to her discomfort. Sophie managed to laugh, but Maya could see the effort it cost her. Halfway through the song, Sophie missed a step, stumbling slightly. Daniel steadied her, concern crossing his face. "You okay, sis?" he asked, loud enough for Maya to hear. "Just tripped on my dress," Sophie replied with a forced smile. "Maybe I shouldn't have had that glass of champagne earlier." Daniel laughed, accepting the excuse, but Maya saw the flash of pain cross Sophie's face as she pressed a hand briefly to her side. The doctor moved even closer, positioning herself at the edge of the dance floor. 3 minutes. That's how long Maya estimated Sophie had before her body gave out. The pallor had taken on a grayish tinge and her breathing had become shallow. Classic signs of shock were setting in, which meant significant internal bleeding was likely. Maya pulled out her phone and typed a quick search for the nearest hospital, 18 minutes away. Too far if this was what she suspected. The song mercifully ended and Sophie immediately excused herself, moving quickly toward the venue building. Maya followed, maintaining enough distance that it wouldn't seem obvious to the other guests. In the hallway outside the restrooms, Sophie finally stopped pretending. She leaned heavily against the wall, one arm wrapped around her midsection, her eyes squeezed shut in pain. "Sophie," Maya said firmly, approaching her, "this isn't something you can push through. You need medical attention now." Sophie opened her eyes, and Maya saw the fear there, the reality of the situation finally breaking through her determination to hide it. "I think something's really wrong," Sophie whispered, her voice shaking. "It hurts so much worse than before." "I know," Maya said gently, helping Sophie slide down to sit on the floor as her legs began to give way. "I'm going to help you, okay? But I need you to tell me exactly what you're feeling." "Sharp pain on my right side," Sophie managed between shallow breaths. "And I feel so dizzy. Like the room won't stop spinning." Maya pressed 2 fingers against Sophie's wrist, counting her pulse. Too fast, and her skin was cold and clammy. Another sign of shock. "I think you might have an ectopic pregnancy," Maya explained, keeping her voice calm and steady. "That's when the fertilized egg implants outside the uterus, usually in the fallopian tube. If that's the case, we need to get you to a hospital immediately." Sophie's eyes widened with fear. "The baby. Right now we need to focus on you," Maya said firmly. "An ectopic pregnancy can cause internal bleeding if the fallopian tube ruptures, which might be happening now." Maya pulled out her phone again, ready to call 911 when Natalie appeared in the hallway. "Sophie, are you okay?" Natalie asked, rushing toward them, her wedding dress swishing around her ankles. "What's happening?" Sophie looked at her new sister-in-law, tears filling her eyes. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I didn't want to ruin your day." Maya made a quick decision. "Natalie, Sophie needs medical help right now. I think she has an ectopic pregnancy that's ruptured. We need to call an ambulance and find somewhere private to lay her down." To her credit, Natalie didn't waste time with questions or expressions of shock. She immediately pointed down the hall. "There's a small lounge through there. I'll tell Daniel and keep everyone else away." As Natalie hurried off, Maya helped Sophie to her feet, supporting most of her weight as they moved slowly toward the lounge. Sophie's steps were becoming more unsteady, her breathing more labored. "Stay with me," Maya urged as she felt Sophie growing heavier against her side. Just a few more steps. They made it to the small room, which had a couch and a few armchairs. Maya carefully helped Sophie lie down on the couch, elevating her feet with a cushion to help combat the shock. As she called 911, requesting an ambulance with lights and sirens, Maya kept her free hand on Sophie's wrist, monitoring her pulse. It was becoming more rapid and thready, a dangerous sign. "Help is coming," Maya assured her, ending the call. "They'll be here in about 12 minutes. Sophie's eyes were unfocused now, her face ashen. "I didn't tell anyone," she murmured. "Not even Daniel. I wanted it to be a surprise." "He'll know soon enough," Maya said gently. "Just focus on staying awake for me, okay?" The door opened and Daniel rushed in, his face pale with worry. "Sophie." He knelt beside the couch, taking his sister's hand. "What's happening?" Natalie said something about pregnancy. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry. I was going to tell you after the honeymoon. I didn't want to steal your spotlight." Daniel shook his head, squeezing her hand. "That doesn't matter now. Why didn't you say you weren't feeling well?" "The ambulance is on its way," Maya interrupted, staying focused on the medical situation. "Daniel, she needs to stay calm. Can you help with that while I monitor her condition?" He nodded, immediately turning his attention back to his sister, speaking softly to her while Maya checked her pulse again. As Maya watched them, she knew the next few minutes would be critical. The ambulance was still at least 10 minutes away, and Sophie's condition was deteriorating rapidly. If the bleeding was as severe as Maya suspected, they might not have that long to wait. She would need to rely on every bit of her medical training before this wedding. Night was over. The small lounge had become an island of crisis, amid the celebration still going on outside. Through the closed door, Maya could faintly hear music and laughter, the normal sounds of a wedding reception continuing while inside. A life hung in the balance. Sophie lay on the couch, her breathing shallow, her skin growing clammier by the minute. Daniel knelt beside her, holding her hand and speaking softly, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. Natalie stood by the door, keeping guests from entering while occasionally relaying information about the ambulance's progress. Maya knew they were in trouble. Sophie's pulse was getting weaker and faster, classic signs of hypovolemic shock from blood loss. The ambulance was still at least 8 minutes away, and Sophie's condition was deteriorating more rapidly than Maya had initially estimated. "The dispatchers said there's a traffic accident blocking the main road," Natalie whispered to Maya. "They're trying to find an alternate route, but it might add a few minutes." Maya nodded, her mind racing through options. In the hospital with a team and equipment, this would be a straightforward emergency. Here, in a wedding venue with nothing but her medical knowledge and whatever basic first aid supplies might be on hand, the situation was far more dire. She turned back to Sophie, whose eyes were now fluttering closed. "Sophie, I need you to stay awake," Maya said firmly, tapping her cheek lightly. "Talk to me. Tell me about the nursery you're planning." Sophie's eyes opened slightly. "Haven't planned anything yet," she murmured. "Too early." "Well, start thinking about it now," Maya encouraged while checking Sophie's pulse again. "What color would you paint the walls?" As Sophie whispered something about pale yellow, Maya made a difficult decision. She couldn't wait for the ambulance. If Sophie was bleeding internally as severely as she suspected, every minute counted. "Daniel," Maya said, her voice calm but authoritative, "I need to examine Sophie more thoroughly. Her symptoms suggest a ruptured ectopic pregnancy, which is causing internal bleeding. The ambulance might not get here in time if that's the case." Daniel looked up, his face pale. "What do you need to do?" "I need to check her abdomen for signs of bleeding and assess how far along the pregnancy is," Maya explained. "It will help me know how serious this is and what to tell the EMTs when they arrive." Understanding dawned in Daniel's eyes. "You need to examine under her dress?" Maya nodded. "I wouldn't ask if it wasn't necessary. But we're losing time, and the more information I have, the better I can help her." Daniel squeezed his sister's hand. "Sophie, the doctor needs to examine you. Is that okay?" Sophie's eyes opened, clearer for a moment as she focused on her brother, then on Maya. "Yes," she whispered. "Please help." "Natalie," Maya called, "can you find something to use as a privacy screen? And ask if there's a first aid kit anywhere in the building." Natalie nodded and disappeared, returning moments later with a tablecloth from one of the reception tables and a small first aid kit from the kitchen. "This is all they had," she said, handing the kit to Maya. "The staff is helping direct the ambulance to the service entrance. It's closer to this room." "Perfect," Maya said, taking the kit and opening it quickly. Basic supplies, bandages, gauze, antiseptic wipes. Nothing that would help with internal bleeding. But she hadn't expected more. Natalie and Daniel held the tablecloth up as a makeshift privacy screen, while Maya carefully lifted Sophie's pale green dress. She kept her movements gentle but efficient, her mind shifting fully into doctor mode. Sophie's lower abdomen was slightly distended, another sign of internal bleeding. Maya pressed her fingers lightly across the area, noting where Sophie winced most severely. "Right lower quadrant pain," Maya murmured to herself, consistent with right tubal rupture. As Maya continued her examination, her hand froze suddenly over a scar on Sophie's lower abdomen. It wasn't the typical appendectomy scar she was accustomed to seeing. This was different, a specific surgical pattern she recognized immediately. "Sophie," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This scar. When did you have this surgery?" Sophie's eyes fluttered open again. 5 years ago, she managed. "Rare condition. They said I might not ever have children." Maya felt a chill run through her body. The scar was from a highly specialized procedure, one she knew intimately because she had helped pioneer it during her surgical fellowship. It was a technique developed for women with a rare uterine condition that made pregnancy both difficult to achieve and extremely high risk. "Do you remember the name of your surgeon?" Maya asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Team of doctors," Sophie whispered. "Main one was Dr. Patel, I think, at University Medical." Maya's breath caught. Dr. Patel had been her mentor. And 5 years ago, Maya had been on his surgical team as they developed this exact procedure. They had performed it on only 7 patients during that time. "Sophie," Maya said, her voice steadier than she felt, "I think I was part of your surgical team 5 years ago. I worked with Dr. Patel on this specific procedure during my fellowship." Daniel looked up sharply. "You were her doctor? How is that possible?" "Medical coincidences happen more often than you'd think," Maya said, continuing her examination while processing this unexpected connection. "The procedure is very rare. Only a handful of surgeons in the country are trained to do it." The realization added another layer of urgency to the situation. Maya knew exactly what Sophie's medical history entailed, what complications could arise, and why this pregnancy was particularly dangerous for her. "The good news," Maya said, trying to inject some hope into the situation, "is that I'm familiar with your condition. That will help us communicate better with the emergency team when they arrive." Sophie's eyes filled with tears. "Will I lose the baby?" Maya hesitated, weighing honesty against comfort. "An ectopic pregnancy can't continue, Sophie. The fertilized egg can't survive outside the uterus, and it's life-threatening for you if we don't address it." Sophie closed her eyes, a tear sliding down her cheek. "I thought this was my miracle," she whispered. "After they said I might never—" "I know," Maya said softly, gently lowering Sophie's dress and signaling to Natalie and Daniel that they could lower the tablecloth. "But right now we need to focus on saving you." Just then the door burst open as 2 EMTs wheeled in a stretcher. Maya had never been so relieved to see medical professionals in her life. "What have we got?" asked the first EMT, a woman with short blonde hair and efficient movements. 30-year-old female, approximately 12 weeks pregnant. "Suspected ruptured ectopic pregnancy," Maya reported, falling easily into medical terminology. "Patient has a history of uterine reconstruction surgery 5 years ago that makes this pregnancy high risk. She's showing signs of hypovolemic shock, rapid heartbeat, low blood pressure, cold and clammy skin." The EMTs moved quickly, transferring Sophie to the stretcher and attaching monitoring equipment. One placed an oxygen mask over Sophie's face while the other started an IV line. "Blood pressure 80/40, announced the male EMT. "Pulse 130, definitely. In shock. Are you her doctor?" the female EMT asked Maya. "Trauma surgeon, but not her regular doctor," Maya explained. "I'm a wedding guest who recognized the symptoms. However, I was coincidentally part of the surgical team that performed her uterine reconstruction 5 years ago." The EMTs exchanged surprised glances. "Well, you should come with us then," the female EMT said. The hospital will want that medical history. Daniel stood, still holding his sister's hand. I'm coming too. She's my sister. The female EMT nodded. One family member can ride along. Natalie stepped forward, touching Daniel's arm. Go. I'll handle things here and meet you at the hospital as soon as I can. Daniel looked torn, caught between his sister and his new wife on what should have been the happiest day of his life. Go, Natalie repeated firmly. Sophie needs you now. Daniel pulled Natalie into a quick embrace. I'm so sorry about our wedding night. Don't be ridiculous, Natalie said, giving him a gentle push toward the stretcher. Family comes first, always. As the EMTs prepared to move Sophie, Maya quickly gathered her purse and kicked off her heels, knowing she'd be running alongside the stretcher. The next few hours would be critical. Sophie reached out weakly, catching Maya's wrist. Thank you, she whispered through the oxygen mask. For seeing what others didn't, Maya squeezed her hand gently. That's my job, and it seems we were meant to meet again. As they rushed Sophie through the service entrance to the waiting ambulance, Maya couldn't help but marvel at the strange twists of fate. 5 years ago, she had been one of several surgeons working to give Sophie a chance at someday having a family. Today, by sheer coincidence, she was fighting to save Sophie's life when that same dream had turned dangerous. Behind them, the sounds of the wedding reception continued, the celebration unaware of the drama unfolding just outside its doors. In the ambulance, machines beeped as the EMTs worked to stabilize Sophie for the journey to the hospital. Maya sat beside the stretcher, one hand on Sophie's arm, providing what comfort she could while mentally preparing for what lay ahead. The universe had brought them together twice now, first as surgeon and patient, now as wedding guests thrust into a medical emergency, and Maya couldn't shake the feeling that this connection wasn't finished yet. The ambulance sped through the evening traffic, sirens wailing as they cut through the usual Saturday night congestion. Inside, the female EMT, whose name tag read Diane, worked efficiently, checking Sophie's vitals and adjusting the flow of fluids into her IV. Blood pressure still dropping, Diane announced, her voice calm but urgent. 4638 now. Maya watched the monitor with growing concern. Despite the fluids being pumped into Sophie's veins, her blood pressure continued to fall, a clear sign she was losing blood faster than they could replace it. Daniel sat across from Maya, still in his wedding tuxedo, his face a mask of worry as he held his sister's limp hand. Is she going to be okay? He asked, his voice barely audible over the ambulance's siren. Maya met his eyes across the stretcher. The hospital is ready for her. They have surgeons standing by. She didn't make promises she couldn't keep, another habit from years in trauma medicine. But she tried to offer what reassurance she could. The fact that we recognize the problem quickly improves her chances. Sophie's eyes fluttered open momentarily, finding her brother's face. I'm sorry, she whispered through the oxygen mask. Your wedding. Don't worry about that, Daniel said, squeezing her hand. Natalie and I have our whole lives ahead of us. Right now, you're what matters. The ambulance took a sharp turn and Maya steadied herself against the wall. Through the small window, she could see they were approaching the hospital, a large building with bright emergency lights illuminating the ambulance bay. 2 minutes out, the driver called back. They've got a trauma team waiting. Diane nodded and began speaking into her radio, updating the hospital on Sophie's condition. Maya listened to the medical shorthand, blood pressure, heart rate, oxygen levels, translating it into what it really meant. Sophie was slipping away from them minute by minute. As the ambulance pulled into the emergency bay, Maya made a quick decision. I'm coming in with her, she told Diane. I have specific knowledge of her previous surgery that could be relevant. Diane gave her an appraising look, then nodded. Let them know you're a surgeon when we get in. The back doors swung open to reveal a team in scrubs waiting with another stretcher. The transfer happened in seconds, a carefully choreographed dance that Maya had participated in hundreds of times, though always from the receiving end. 30-year-old female, approximately 12 weeks pregnant with suspected ruptured ectopic pregnancy, Diane reported as they rolled Sophie through the automatic doors. BP 7236, pulse 140, oxygen sat 94% on mask. She's received 2 liters of fluids en route. This is Dr. Maya Lin, a trauma surgeon who happened to be on scene and has knowledge of the patient's medical history. A tall doctor with gray-streaked hair nodded at Maya as they rushed down the corridor. "Dr. Lin, I'm Dr. Kovacs, attending surgeon tonight. What can you tell me about this patient's history?" 5 years ago, she underwent an experimental uterine reconstruction procedure at University Medical, Maya explained, jogging alongside the stretcher. "I was part of Dr. Patel's surgical team. The procedure addressed a congenital abnormality that made pregnancy unlikely and high risk. The fact that she conceived at all is remarkable, but it also complicates the current situation." Dr. Kovacs' eyebrows rose slightly. "Patel's procedure? I've read about it. Never seen a case in person. Neither have I since we did the original surgeries," Maya admitted. "But I know every step of the reconstruction, which could be critical if you need to navigate around the previous surgical site." They pushed through another set of doors into a trauma room where nurses and technicians waited. Sophie was transferred to the examination table, and a flurry of activity surrounded her, cutting away her dress, attaching monitors, drawing blood. Daniel had been stopped at the entrance to the trauma area, left to wait outside while the medical team worked. Maya felt a pang of sympathy for him, standing alone in his wedding tuxedo, watching through the windows as strangers fought to save his sister's life. Dr. Kovacs quickly examined Sophie's abdomen, his experienced hands finding the same tenderness and distension that Maya had noted earlier. "Ultrasound," he called out, and a technician immediately moved forward with the machine. The room fell silent as Dr. Kovacs moved the ultrasound wand across Sophie's abdomen, all eyes on the screen. Maya saw it immediately, the dark fluid filling Sophie's abdominal cavity, the ruptured fallopian tube, and the tiny form that had caused this life-threatening situation. "Definite tubal rupture with significant hemoperitoneum," Dr. Kovacs confirmed. "We need an OR now. Type and cross for 4 units and start the massive transfusion protocol." Nurse rushed to the phone while another pushed a unit of negative blood into Sophie's IV. "Universal, donor blood, the kind they gave when there wasn't time to wait for a perfect match, Dr. Lin," Kovacs said, turning to Maya. "I'd like you to scrub in, given your familiarity with the previous surgery. We could use your expertise." Maya nodded, pushing aside thoughts of the wedding reception she'd left behind. "Of course." "Someone find Dr. Lin some scrubs," Kovacs called out as they began wheeling Sophie toward the elevator. "And page gynecology for backup." A nurse handed Maya a set of blue scrubs. "Locker rooms down the hall to the left. You can change there and meet us in OR3. Maya took one moment to step out and speak to Daniel, who stood anxiously in the waiting area. "They're taking her to surgery now," she explained quickly. "Dr. Kovacs has asked me to assist because of my knowledge of her previous procedure." Daniel's eyes widened. "You're going to operate on her?" "I'll be assisting," Maya clarified. "Dr. Kovacs is excellent, one of the best, judging by how he handled the assessment. I'll make sure they have all the information they need about her unique anatomy." Daniel ran a hand through his hair, the reality of the situation clearly sinking in. "This morning I was getting ready to say my vows. Now I might lose my sister." Maya put a hand on his arm. "We're going to do everything possible for her. Try to reach your parents and let Natalie know what's happening. I'll send updates when I can." With that, Maya rushed to change into scrubs, her mind already shifting into surgery mode, reviewing the details of Sophie's original procedure, planning how to explain the complex reconstruction to Dr. Kovacs, and preparing for what would likely be a challenging operation. 10 minutes later, she stood at a surgical sink scrubbing her hands and arms with practiced precision. Through the window into OR3, she could see the team prepping Sophie, who was now unconscious, intubated, and draped for surgery. Dr. Kovacs joined her at the sink. "The latest blood work shows her hemoglobin at 6.2. She's lost nearly half her blood volume. We need to move fast." Maya nodded, the gravity of the situation clear. A normal hemoglobin level would be around 12. At 6.2, Sophie's body was struggling to deliver oxygen to her tissues. The previous surgery created an unusual blood supply to the right fallopian tube, Maya explained as they scrubbed. "We had to reroute several vessels to preserve fertility. You'll need to be careful with the vascular pedicle at the cornua." Dr. Kovacs listened intently, asking precise questions about the reconstruction. Maya was impressed by his quick understanding of the complex procedure. Minutes later, they stood on either side of the operating table, gowned and gloved, As the nurse completed the final count of instruments, scalpel, Dr. Kovac said, and the surgery began. The moment they opened Sophie's abdomen, dark blood welled up, confirming their diagnosis. Dr. Kovac suctioned it away efficiently while Maya held retractors, giving him a clear view of the damage. "There's the rupture," he said, pointing to Sophie's right fallopian tube, which had split open, the tissue angry and swollen. "Looks like it happened at exactly the spot where the previous reconstruction created that unusual angle." Maya nodded. The pregnancy probably implanted at the weakest point of the tube, where the tissue was compromised from the original surgery. They worked in tandem, Kovac leading but following Maya's guidance when they encountered the altered anatomy from the previous surgery. It was like navigating a familiar landscape that had been slightly rearranged, recognizable but with unexpected hazards. "We'll need to remove the entire tube," Dr. Kovac said after assessing the damage. "There's no way to save it." "Agreed," Maya said, her heart heavy with the knowledge that this would further reduce Sophie's already slim chances of ever conceiving again. "But we should be able to preserve the ovary." The surgery continued for nearly 2 hours, complicated by Sophie's abnormal anatomy and the extensive bleeding. Twice her blood pressure dropped dangerously low, requiring additional transfusions and careful management by the anesthesiologist. As Dr. Kovac was placing the final sutures, he glanced up at Maya. "You know, it's remarkable that you happened to be at that wedding. Without your early recognition of the symptoms and your knowledge of her surgical history, this could have gone very differently." Maya thought about the strange chain of events that had brought her here. The wedding invitation she'd almost declined due to work. The coincidental timing of her arrival, her noticing Sophie's symptoms when no one else did. "Sometimes the universe puts us where we need to be," she said simply. After the surgery, Maya found Daniel in the waiting room, still in his wedding clothes but with his tie undone and his jacket draped over a chair. Natalie sat beside him, having clearly left the reception to join her new husband. They both stood as Maya approached. "She's stable," Maya said before they could ask, seeing the question in their eyes. "We had to remove her right fallopian tube, but we saved the ovary. She lost a lot of blood, but she received transfusions and her vitals are improving." The relief on Daniel's face was immediate and profound. "Can we see her?" "She's in recovery now. They'll move her to the ICU soon for overnight monitoring, and you can see her briefly then. She'll be groggy from the anesthesia, but she should be able to recognize you." Natalie stepped forward and, to Maya's surprise, pulled her into a tight hug. "Thank you," she whispered. "Daniel told me everything. How you noticed something was wrong, how you were part of her original surgery team. It's like a miracle that you were there today." Maya returned the hug awkwardly, not used to such expressions of gratitude. In the operating room, successful surgeries were expected, not celebrated. "I'm just glad I could help." "Our parents are on their way," Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. "They were in Phoenix for a conference. They should be here by morning." Maya nodded, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. The adrenaline that had carried her through the emergency was fading, leaving her drained. "You look dead on your feet," Natalie observed. "Let us drive you back to your hotel." "I should stay, at least until Sophie's settled in the ICU," Maya protested. "Dr. Kovac said he'd call if anything changes," Daniel said. "And you've done more than enough already. Please let us do this small thing for you." Too tired to argue, Maya agreed. As they walked toward the hospital exit, she realized she was still wearing scrubs, her blue dress left behind in the chaos of the emergency. "Some wedding night, huh?" Natalie said with a sad smile as they stepped outside into the cool night air. Daniel put his arm around his new wife. "Not exactly what we planned, but still remarkable in its own way," Natalie replied, squeezing his hand. "And we have a lifetime for perfect days. Tonight was about family, and that's what marriage is really about, isn't it?" Maya watched them, touched by their resilience and support for each other in this crisis. She thought about her own life, the long hours at the hospital, the missed connections with friends, the relationships that had fallen by the wayside as she pursued her career. Perhaps, she reflected as they drove through the quiet streets, there was a lesson here for her as well. Sometimes the most important surgeries weren't the ones you performed in an operating room, but the connections you maintained with the people who mattered. 6 months passed before Maya found herself back at the same hotel, in the same city, getting ready for another celebration. This time she wasn't rushing. She'd arrived the night before and had plenty of time to prepare. As she fastened a simple silver necklace around her neck, she thought about how much had changed since that wedding day. Her phone buzzed with a text message. "We're in the lobby whenever you're ready." "No rush," Maya smiled at Natalie's message. In the months since the wedding, they had developed a genuine friendship, something Maya hadn't expected. What began as weekly check-in calls about Sophie's recovery had evolved into regular conversations about their lives, dreams, and everyday challenges. The elevator ride to the lobby gave Maya a moment to reflect on the journey that had led to today. After Sophie's emergency surgery, Maya had extended her weekend stay to monitor her recovery, even delaying her return flight to ensure her former patient was stable. She'd visited the hospital daily, reviewing charts and consulting with Dr. Kovacs about Sophie's unique case. Sophie's parents had been overwhelmed with gratitude when they arrived the morning after the surgery. Learning that Maya had been part of their daughter's original surgical team 5 years earlier, and had now helped save her life, seemed too remarkable to be mere coincidence. "There you are," Natalie called as Maya stepped into the lobby. She looked radiant in a simple blue dress, her wedding ring catching the light as she waved. Daniel stood beside her, his arm around Sophie, who looked healthier than Maya had ever seen her. "Sorry to keep you waiting," Maya said, joining the group. "We're early anyway," Daniel replied. "Mom and Dad are meeting us there." The drive to the hospital was filled with light conversation and laughter, so different from the last time they had made this journey together. Maya watched Sophie, noting her healthy color and the ease of her movements. The recovery had been difficult at first, with complications from blood loss and the emotional toll of losing the pregnancy. But Sophie had shown remarkable resilience. "Nervous?" Maya asked her as they pulled into the hospital parking lot. Sophie shook her head, her hand resting lightly on her still flat stomach. "Not nervous, just overwhelmed, in a good way." Today was Sophie's first ultrasound appointment. 3 months ago, against all medical expectations, she had discovered she was pregnant again. This time the embryo had implanted correctly in her uterus. Given her medical history and the loss of one fallopian tube, the pregnancy was considered high risk, but so far, everything was progressing normally. The hospital looked different in daylight without the urgency of an emergency. They checked in at the obstetrics department, where Sophie was immediately recognized by the staff. Her case had become something of a legend in the hospital. "Dr. Chen is waiting for you," the receptionist said with a smile. "She's very excited about this appointment." Dr. Chen was the high-risk pregnancy specialist who had taken on Sophie's case. She had consulted with Maya and Dr. Kovacs extensively, reviewing the details of both surgeries to develop the best care plan. In the exam room, Dr. Chen greeted them warmly. "The whole team is here." "Sophie, how are you feeling today?" "Good," Sophie replied, settling onto the examination table. "The morning sickness is finally easing up." Dr. Chen nodded approvingly. "That's typical as you move into the second trimester. Let's take a look at this miracle baby of yours, shall we?" The room fell silent as Dr. Chen applied gel to Sophie's abdomen and moved the ultrasound wand across her skin. The screen remained black for a moment, then filled with a grainy gray image. "There we are," Dr. Chen said softly. "Perfect position, good size for 14 weeks, and..." She adjusted a dial and suddenly a rapid whooshing sound filled the room. Strong heartbeat at 158 beats per minute. Sophie gasped, tears filling her eyes as she stared at the screen. Daniel moved closer to his sister, squeezing her hand while Natalie wiped away her own tears. Maya stood slightly apart, watching the scene with professional satisfaction and personal joy. The tiny form on the screen represented not just a medical miracle, but the culmination of a journey that had begun in an operating room 5 years ago, continued at a wedding she'd almost missed, and now had reached this moment of possibility. "I want to show you something," Dr. Chen said, adjusting the ultrasound view. "See this area here? This is where your reconstructed uterine wall is supporting the pregnancy perfectly. The surgical technique from your first operation created the foundation that's making this pregnancy possible." Sophie looked up at Maya. "So that first surgery, the one you assisted with, is why I can have this baby now?" Maya nodded. "The goal of that procedure was always to make pregnancy possible, even though the chances seemed slim. Dr. Patel's technique was revolutionary." And then you happened to be at my brother's wedding when the ectopic pregnancy ruptured, Sophie continued, shaking her head in wonder. If you hadn't been there, but she was, Daniel said firmly. Somehow the universe put the one person who could help you in the right place at exactly the right time. After the appointment, they gathered at a cafe near the hospital, joined by Sophie and Daniel's parents. The conversation flowed easily as they discussed nursery plans and baby names, with the easy familiarity of people who had been through something profound together. Have you decided if you're going to find out the gender? Natalie asked as she passed a plate of pastries. Sophie exchanged a glance with her mother. Actually, we already know. The genetic testing came back yesterday. The table fell silent, everyone leaning forward expectantly. It's a girl, Sophie announced, her face glowing. A healthy baby girl. Cheers and congratulations erupted around the table. In the midst of the celebration, Sophie's mother touched Maya's arm gently. We've never properly thanked you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Not just for what you did at the wedding, but for being part of the team that gave Sophie this chance in the first place. Maya smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the coffee in her hands. That's the thing about medicine. You never know which patient, which surgery, which moment will come back around in unexpected ways. Later, as the gathering was winding down, Sophie pulled Maya aside. I've been thinking about this for months and I wanted to ask you something important, she said. Would you consider being the baby's godmother? Maya stared at her, genuinely surprised. Me? But we barely know each other. Sophie laughed. You've literally had your hands on my internal organs twice. I think that counts for something. Besides, you're part of this baby's story already. Without you, she wouldn't exist. I don't know what to say, Maya admitted. Say yes, Sophie urged. It would mean so much to me. And I want my daughter to know the amazing doctor who made her life possible. Maya found herself nodding, unexpectedly moved by the request. Yes, I'd be honored. As they rejoined the others, Maya reflected on the strange path that had led her here. Throughout her medical career, she had always focused on the immediate impact of her work. The lives saved in the emergency room, the successful surgeries, the patients who walked out of the hospital when they might not have survived otherwise. But this was different. This was seeing the long arc of medicine's impact, the ripple effects that continued long after the surgical gloves came off. The baby that would be born in a few months existed because of a surgery performed years ago and a chance encounter at a wedding. 6 months ago, Maya had arrived at a wedding feeling disconnected and isolated, too busy with her medical career to maintain friendships or build relationships. Now she found herself surrounded by people who had become like family, with a goddaughter on the way. Some might call it coincidence. Others might say it was fate. Maya preferred to think of it as medicine at its most profound, not just healing bodies, but weaving connections between lives in ways that could never be predicted. As she looked around at the smiling faces, Maya realized she had gained something she hadn't even known she was missing. In trying to save one life, she had found a whole new family.